Mankind is far from being the sole inhabitant of the earth, and we must share this world with numerous other animal species. As humans developed a capacity for symbolic thinking, we used animals as metaphorical symbols to stand for enigmatic concepts, as people used elements in their environments to produce new symbolic meanings. One animal that is particularly useful in forming ideas is the snake. Snakes are some of the most common animals in mythology, appearing in many forms including sea snakes, snakes with multiple heads, and winged, fire-breathing dragons. In fact, serpents are so readily found in mythology that one may begin to wonder why this is so. Why do snakes constantly appear in our myths? The answer may lie in the human psyche itself. If you have seen my video about Jungian archetypes, you will know that the mind has an archetypal structure which is encoded in our DNA. It seems that a natural fear of snakes is also encoded in our DNA. Hence, snakes are an archetype of the human mind. This archetypal system is a characteristic of primate evolution, specifically as primates develop the traits needed to live in the trees. This theory has been put forth by the anthropologist Lynne Isbell. The snake detection theory argues that snakes were ultimately responsible for the origin of primates, by acting as a selective pressure in the modification and expansion of primate visual systems, such that vision is now their predominant sensory interface with the environment. Predatory pressure from snakes is proposed to have contributed to primate visual modification and expansion, by weeding out those individuals with poorer ability and favoring those with better ability to visually detect motionless snakes. According to this theory, as primates became better adapted for arboreal life, snakes, which had evolved in the trees for millions of years prior to primates, began to prey on monkeys. Furthermore, even snakes that don't view primates as prey are a significant threat, as many snakes are venomous enough to kill in a single bite. Primates are very curious by nature, and would have probably encountered many snakes while rummaging through leaf litter. This evolutionary pressure favored individuals who developed a natural fear of snakes. Furthermore, this selective pressure may have resulted in the evolution of eyes with greater visual acuity, giving us the ability to easily spot and recognize snakes. The typical image of a snake is ingrained in the unconscious mind of primates, allowing us to quickly detect and react to the threat, alerting group members as well. In her research, Isbell has noted that many primates experience strong reactions when encountering snakes. Even monkeys that have had no prior experience with snakes will flee and call loudly if one is detected. The archetypal fear of snakes in the primate psyche has two elements. First is a mind and visual system built partially for spotting snakes, and the second is a strong negative emotional response to snakes. Amazingly, this archetypal structure still exists in humans today, left over from our time in the trees. A fear of snakes, known as ophidiophobia, is one of the most common fears people have, and this despite the fact that many people today will probably never encounter a snake. Although the fear of snakes might be built into the primate psyche, this fear can be unlearned through exposure, just as mountaineers can overcome their natural fear of heights. This natural instinct of the unconscious mind is also evidenced by the abundance of mythological depictions featuring snakes, as Isbell notes in her book. The prominence of snakes in religions, myths, and past and present folklore around the world underscores our deep human connection to them. We should note that Carl Jung himself, who discovered the collective unconscious, did not recognize this connection, and he believed that snakes in mythology represented the shadow archetype, or the Great Mother. This isn't necessarily wrong, as mythologies tend to blend archetypal motifs in order to produce new concepts, but the ubiquity of snakes and dragons in our ancient stories seems to be the result of a deep evolutionary history. Snakes became represented in our creative endeavors through the process of projecting internal psychic contents into pictorial and narrative form, and since a fear of snakes has a collective basis, mythological snakes can evoke strong emotional reactions in nearly everyone. What does the snake, or its fire-breathing reptilian counterpart, the dragon, represent in mythology? In short, the snake can represent many things, and we can think of the snake as a useful psychological tool for associating certain ideas with a negative connotation, although there are exceptions to this which we will discuss later on. For example, the snake in the story of Adam and Eve represents the evil of temptation. Medieval dragons commonly represent greed, and the slaying of dragons in European legends is commonly taken to be a symbol of Christianity triumphing over paganism. In these cases, the serpent is being used almost like a propaganda tool, to give a negative meaning to certain ideas, which society deems as evil, and thus a society is directed to condemn certain ideas. Since humans are predisposed to fearing snakes, they frequently appear as a symbol of evil. As a result, a hero who challenges and slays a serpent is elevated and viewed as a conqueror of evil. The slaying of the serpent or dragon motif is extremely common in mythology. Many of these stories have a deep cosmological significance, which demonstrates how psychological archetypes influence our perception of the world, and how our unconscious nature finds its way into our myths. Snakes in many of these stories are depicted as primordial creatures representing our primitive unconscious nature, and are thus associated with chaos. For example, in Greek mythology, Typhon was a massive serpent-like creature with a human head, who ruled the universe until being challenged by Zeus. Zeus defeats the Titan and succeeds him as ruler of the cosmos. The way in which a primordial being, in the form of a snake, is overcome by the lightning god is an archetypal metaphor about consciousness succeeding the unconscious, although its mythological meaning is quite diverse, and symbols don't have fixed or definite meanings. A similar myth in ancient Greece was that of Apollo, fighting a serpent named Python. These myths inspired many other Greek tales of brave heroes vanquishing evil snakes and dragons, such as Cadmus the Dragon Slayer and Heracles' battle with the Hydra. In association with the unconscious, many snakes are associated with water. Jung notes that water is the commonest symbol of the unconscious. The lake in the valley is the unconscious, which lies, as it were, underneath consciousness, so that it is often referred to as the subconscious, usually with the pejorative connotation of an inferior consciousness. Water is the valley spirit, the water dragon of Tao, whose nature resembles water, a yang embraced in the yin. Psychologically, therefore, water means spirit that has become unconscious. Water is used as a metaphor, especially for the chaotic state of the universe prior to being ordered by a god of some sort. Snakes are used to strengthen this meaning, often representing the unconscious in opposition to consciousness. This adversity to the unconscious is essentially an attempt by society to restrict our instincts, a process needed for any society to function, and many myths depict the conflict between the light of consciousness and the darkness of the unconscious. A primal sea serpent in the Bible, named Leviathan, is an adversary of Yahweh. In Norse mythology, the world serpent Jormungandr, who inhabits the oceans of Midgard, also known as Earth, battles against Thor, the god of lightning. In one Japanese myth, the storm god Susanoo descends from heaven to fight an 8-headed sea dragon named Orochi. The dichotomy in this myth isn't between light and dark, but rather between heaven, symbolized by the storm god, and earth, symbolized by the sea serpent. Again, these heroes are elevated by the fact that they are the slayers of serpents, an animal which humans often hate by instinct. Many Chinese serpents are associated with water, rain, and flooding. In contrast, light, lightning, and fire are symbols of consciousness, being associated with the light of consciousness. The contrast between conscious and unconscious is also made into a symbolic image by the distinction between heaven and earth, up and down. Gong Gong, a Chinese serpent of chaos and catastrophic flooding, is defeated by Zhurong, a Chinese god of fire. Some of these primordial serpents are actually creation deities, who form and structure the world before being overthrown by an anthropomorphic deity. In ancient Egypt, one legend tells of the chaos serpent Epep, who battles against the sun god Ra. Tiamat was the name of an ancient Mesopotamian snake deity representing saltwater, and is overthrown by the storm god Marduk. In one Hindu myth, the god Krishna challenges and slays a naga named Kaliya. Nagas are serpent-like creatures in Hindu mythology that live beneath the earth and can assume human form. Shesha is another naga in Hinduism, and is in fact king of the nagas. He is depicted as a many-headed snake and is not inherently evil. And so while many snakes are portrayed as adversaries to heroes, there are also cases of benevolent snakes. The epic battle between a chaos entity of the primordial waters, often a snake, and a heroic deity, symbolizing order and consciousness, is a motif known as the chaoskampf, which means the struggle against chaos. The use of snakes in this theme is meant to associate chaos and the unconscious with something inherently evil and bad. The chaoskampf also includes myths that don't include snakes, but snakes, again, have the psychological advantage of seeming inherently bad due to our natural fear of snakes. The use of the snake in the chaoskampf is just one example of how the unconscious makes itself known through expression. Despite the fact that snakes are frequently depicted as evil, not all cultures have taken this view of snakes. Snake symbolism can have a variety of meanings. In some African and Native American cultures, for example, snakes represent fertility. The Ouroboros is a serpentine symbol often representing the concept of eternity found in ancient Egypt and alchemical texts. There are also many cases of snakes being worshipped as gods. We have mentioned the cobra goddess of Egypt in a video before, but another example is the indigenous Australian worship of the rainbow serpent, who created the world. In Mesoamerica, the god Quetzalcoatl is described as a feathered serpent and was revered as a god of knowledge. It may seem paradoxical that snakes are being worshipped if humans are naturally averse and afraid of them, but if you think about it, there is actually some sense to this. It makes sense to revere an entity that you fear, just as ancient Egyptians and Mesopotamians both revered and feared their gods. Worship of the snake has a collective basis, since the image of a snake activates our unconscious archetype, and so the snake appears to have a transcendental significance to everybody. In China, dragons are commonly viewed as symbols of great power and ancient wisdom. Chinese emperors used the symbol of the dragon in their own depictions to represent their own power and authority, and inspire fear amongst their subjects and enemies. Many dragons appear in the coat of arms of European countries, being a symbol of power, which, again, speaks to us at an unconscious level. Snakes and dragons also make frequent appearances in our modern stories, sometimes appearing as symbols of evil, to which we are naturally averse, but also as a symbol of power and ancient wisdom. I personally interpret dragons, with their ability to breathe fire and their ability to fly, as representing the true power of the unconscious mind. Other animals, such as lions and spiders, may also appear in our myths for a similar reason, but many animals appear simply because they live side by side with humans and are metaphorically resonant. The ability to project unconscious contents into artistic representations is unique to humans, and this process enables a gradual change of culture, as collective values and beliefs become solidified in mythological form. Mythological symbols inspire us to heroically overcome obstacles and to be our true selves. The process of representing internal psychic contents in artistic form affects us at the individual level, as our unconscious minds become accessible to the light of consciousness, through projections manifesting into the world.